Ken, you can have our Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Oskaloosa School Board of Directors. This is August 13th. First item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda? Thank you. How about a second? Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? If not, would you read the questions?
Who's going to approve the agenda?
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next, moving on to welcome to visitors and public comment. I did not receive any notices of public comment, but welcome to those of you who are in the audience. Next item then on our agenda is reports, communications, and announcements. I think Carl had a word report from a training that he and I went to, so do you want to start with that?
I have, before that report on the Finance and Management Conference I went to, our church put out a history of the Presbyterian Church in Oskaloosa. And I was reading through the history, and in 1854, the congregation outgrown the log building with 75 members. So in May, they contracted to build a new building, new church, $2,810. It was completed in March of 1955. But the final cost landed up $3,000 with the overhead. But anyway, the thing that I wanted to let you know, the old church was leased to Oskaloosa's first school board for $1 a year and became the first high school with 5 students. So I thought that was interesting truth. So 1854, 5 students in high school. So anyway, on my birthday, we went to the school board conference on finance and school management. And the reason I wanted to go, and I registered early, was David Roeder, who's the director of budget and management for the state of Iowa, was the speaker. Rob Sand, the new auditor, was a speaker. They had the House Republican Democrat leader and the Senate House Democratic leader present their views. It was extremely interesting. If you ever get a chance to hear David Roeder, he is an accountant. They're usually boring as can be, and David is the funniest accountant that you'll ever run into. And he talked about the, you hear about the revenue estimating conference and things like that, and I always wondered, what do they look at, what do they look for? And, I knew they looked at income tax, sales use tax, corporate income tax, all those things, but I got a screenshot of the one thing that they look at is Moody's Analytics, Businesses Outlook, Federal Law Changes, Farm Credit, Division of Banking, Federal Reserve, International Trade, Weather Patterns, Trade Agreements, and International Tensions. And they have to make this projection, the estimating conference, and then the legislature is required to use that thing. So I was really interested in that. The one thing that Rob Sand said that I took several pages of notes. So anyway, it said 61% of the school districts in Iowa are projected to lose students, and you as a board member are responsible for the finances. No matter what we think about, board members are responsible. And then it said, doesn't matter if you're a school board member, a church board member, or a board member of any kind, you're responsible for the money. So it was very, very informative. If Mr. Ritter is the speaker next year, I will be the first sign up again. The other thing that they did that was interesting to me was the last item of the day was they had an accountant out of the Iowa Department of Revenue that went over all of the income tax credits that are available, corporate and personal, and that was really interesting to see what all the credits were available to people to use. So anyway, one of the sessions that Shelley and I went to, was about the financial information that we need to share with the potential candidates coming on the board because of the late election. They probably won't come on board until December, and we start dealing with budgets right away in January. And in small breakout group, Shelley and I were, Mrs. Wright went to a different one. I really wish she came to this one also because it was really good. But in our small group, it was a business manager out of West Des Moines, and he had made a sheet that says general fund and where the revenues come from and what they can be used for, and then also the management fund, the apparel fund, student activity fund, capital projects, and all those things in a list. And the only thing is, don't look at the numbers down below because their general fund's $118 million, so that's not our number. So we just didn't get our number plugged in. So I asked Shelley, I couldn't get it to print on one page, and I asked Shelley to print off everybody one of those, and because I think it's a very, very nice piece of paper to have. So anyway, I felt it's very worthwhile. Next year, if somebody wants to go, it's a very good workshop for the right people. Thank you.
I agree. I think it was a good workshop as well. And I haven't had a chance to send this to you, Chad, because the gentleman who gave it to us said he used it with new board members and stuff, because it kind of let people see kind of where property taxes were and what things were in the different funds that those pieces of. So thanks, Carl, for your report.
That was a good conference. The next one coming up is in October, I believe October maybe 17th, and it's labor management and labor relations. It's always good too.
Okay, so on reports, we have several in here. Do people have any questions for?
On August 1st was the back to school fair. I just wanted to make a comment that I thought United Way has been very good with our district, our school district. All the administrators, I think, were in attendance at some point in time. They handed out almost probably 350 backpacks. We have some that are at each school now in United Way, but the United Way also purchased PE shirts, so for the middle school and high school, so they're gray, they're plain gray, so every student should be able to have a shirt for this year. So I think, and I'm not sure what the plan is, but Mr. Scholes is going to take those and distribute them to the units. So I think it was a pretty good fair, and I think a lot of excitement.
Great, thank you. Any questions on the report that we received from the director or student services?
Is there somebody here that can explain the sensory paths that I read about in the newspaper, and it's in the report, and actually I got some phone calls about sensory paths. So.
Okay, sure. You want to talk about the sensory paths?
I'll start, and if Mike has something to add, he can. So the sensory paths are put down on the floor around the school, and they're ways for kids to potentially get the wiggles out. They can practice all different kinds of skills as they touch different parts of the sensory paths as they're going from point A to point B in the building. If I'm a kindergarten teacher, I might have them do rote counting, so every time you step on another thing that's on the path, and all the paths are a little bit different, they're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe they're doing ABCs. As they get older, maybe they're doing different basic facts as they go on the sensory path in the school. And this was funded, I think they piloted some of this last year just using painter's tape, and then was funded through a donation from a former student?
Yes.
Former student's family.
The question I had was going from point A to point B, but how does that work then with PBIS expectations of level 0, bubbles in mouth thing?
Good question. So I think and correct me if I'm wrong, when they piloted last year, they put them in different parts of the building to find those parts where they would be at a place that potentially the students had to sit and wait for a while, like outside the music room. The class might not, before them might not be out, so it gave the teacher an opportunity to kind of do some on-the-spot instruction instead of just having the students stand there quietly in line. And obviously, during the time when the teacher's there helping the students with that, those expectations are lifted as far as having to have a bubble in their mouth or be quiet at the time.
Thank you. And then the outside, the recess areas, they've got some additions, right?
Yes, we've been painting on the playground. We have a snakes and ladders game on both sides, which is, most of you are probably familiar with chutes and ladders, that the students will be able to play. We are still going to put on a big United States map that will be painted. We did track, hopscotch, foursquare. We painted free throw lanes by the basketball hoops. And the PE teachers will be working to teach kids the various games that are out there. That's my understanding, right?
Yes, correct.
Carl, does that help?
I'm fine.
Other questions?
I also, in the elementary report, was pleased to see the principal, the roles and responsibilities of the administration.
Look at that, the roles and responsibilities. Will Mrs. Hatch have input for evaluations for special ed
That,
teachers, or is that yet to be determined?
That is not her role, is not to evaluate the special education teacher. If there are issues with IEP compliance, then that's a conversation between her and the evaluator and the teacher. So she could definitely be a resource and a person sitting in on those conversations, but she is not directly the evaluator. Melanie does that.
I believe we had that conversation this morning, didn't we, Mr. Vice?
Any other questions on reports?
At the middle school, with your home visits, so how many teachers are participating?
So right now, that's being coordinated through Mr. Gingrich, Mr. Maddie,
Okay.
our at-risk coordinator, behavior interventionist, and then I'm also involved with the process, and so is Ms. Hatch. So,
Very good.
yes.
Sort of a pilot to start off. We're just trying to see if that might help encourage a better relationship with families and students. So we're just going to start off with a few, and then hopefully it will grow and catch on for others if it goes well.
When I taught, it was always an eye-opener to go on home visits. Very good.
Learn a lot about your students when you go on one of those.
Yeah, the rest of the story.
I think we put it in the reports, but we did come up with sort of some documentation on what we want our district employees to do, always call ahead, always go in pairs, and, make sure people know why you're coming, and
So Mrs. Wright's getting up. Does anybody else have other questions? She's going down to probably get ready for the next part of our agenda.
Just on reports, I did lay out for you the architect's drawing. It's just a rough drawing, but it's the latest for the Early Childhood Center. Really no conversation around that, but, give you a chance to look at what Carl and Shelley and I have been working on with the committee there. So that's just for your information only. And then Mark did share with you, there's a little packet of a survey that he talked about in his report, and that actual survey there is in that packet for you to look at those questions that they're wanting to gather some data about social emotional learning or gauge how well what they're implementing is going, how that's working. I think that's all that.
I would only, on your plan for the early childhood building and the indoor rec center, there's no line there that's not subject to move.
Yeah, this is a rough draft.
It's not too schematic design yet, it's just all the little boxes will fit in this area. And so So Thursday is an all-day meeting about this, all the aspects of it, so.
So if you have questions or want to, put in a suggestion, just let any of either Shelley, Carl, or I know, and we'll pass that along.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our next item under student achievement, right? And focus on education.
Well, I moved the focus on education to up in the agenda. I don't know if you know this. Because it felt like we were getting a lot of conversation about management type things and less on the stuff that really matters. And I've had a lot of questions about goals for, it's not on. Goals for the year and where are we going and what's
It's up right. And then you go to the edge.
same one.
Correct. It's a triangle.
I don't know. I can see it.
Let me see. I can see that.
There it goes. So the administrators and I have had a lot of conversations about aligning our goals and making sure that our goals are all make sense. And we've had a lot of conversation about minimizing the number of goals, getting down to actual action steps and making an impact. Because if you make an impact on one or two things and do it well, you'll impact a whole lot of other things. Instead of having 10 or 12 or 20 goals, we really want to narrow the focus and we want to make sure they all make sense and are aligned. And so the circles, you've seen these before, but this kind of is a visual representation. We have district goals and priorities. We have then building goals inside of those, PLC or team goals, and then down to the individual goals for teachers, administrators, myself, that kind of thing. So let's start with the district priorities. And again, we need to have a work session to verify that these are still the priorities of the board. And that's something we can talk about if we want to do that before the new board, after the new board. But for now, I kept the same ones. I don't feel like we've outgrown these yet. Culture and climate is at the top. Student achievement is at the top. If you could switch those two places, but both of those are huge. Finances and facilities have been a top priority that you have set for me. And then also safety and security in the district. So again, jump in if you think that I'm off target with any of these things. So starting with the district priority, culture and climate, what are we doing or what are our goals around that? What's the big picture? And this is the district's focus this year for professional development. Again, trying to narrow the focus. We're really going off of district professional development time is going to be spent on this priority, which is culture and climate. And our goals for this year, that all staff gain an understanding of social emotional learning from both their own perspective and a student's perspective. We are helping all staff, not helping, we will ensure all staff will learn and implement strategies connected to students and other staff members and communities from all walks of life and all situations. So we're talking about strategies on how to help children develop socially and emotionally so that they can find better success in school. And that all staff will contribute to a positive culture in our school. So how are we going to go about doing that? And you can see up there in the top left, our district-wide PD this year is going to start out with Eric Jensen. And Eric is an expert on dealing with children with poverty or providing strategies and ways teachers can implement understanding differentiation, like kids come from different backgrounds. And so what are some things that you can do to connect with all kids? Home visits is an excellent place to start because most of us in the teaching profession had a really good experience in school. We enjoyed school. We grew up in I don't want to say normal, but just average households that valued education because we went on to be educators. And so having a perspective from a person like Eric on different backgrounds, the way that kids are raised differently and different, again, poverty, how that affects students, will help teachers broaden their toolbox for strategies that they can use to reach all kids. Another thing that we've got planned, and that is for early November, is Connections Matter. And Connections Matter do the ACEs training, and I'm going to draw a blank on what goes with ACEs, but
Adverse childhood experiences.
that's what ACE stands for, but
Okay.
trauma-informed schools, there it is. Okay, so we're going to dive into, that will provide our requirement for suicide training for our staff. It will help open their perspective on students, why students behave the way they do, what might have caused that. If you've ever done the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, you'll know that you probably have some ACEs in your life, and how has that developed your personality and you as a person. So how is that affecting our students in that same way when they have ACEs? And I can't say them now, but like divorce would be one. Alcoholism in your family is one. Growing up in poverty is an ACE. Abuse, any kind of abuse. So starting to understand those things and how they affect the kids will help us become better teachers. And then we're fortunate to have Dr. Willie Jolly come, and he's going to come in October. And you guys don't know how great this is that he is coming. He is like amazing, and an absolute blessing that Oskaloosa can bring somebody like him in. But we're going to do a presentation for the students in the morning, a presentation for the staff, and along with some other employer staff members in the afternoon, and then there's a community presentation that night. But his message is all about excellence and attitude, and how your attitude drives what happens in your life, and how teachers and other members of society, not just teachers, can influence and impact kids when it comes to attitude and them reaching excellence. So just an absolute, if you Google him, you will be like, wow, Oskaloosa is bringing him in. So all those things tie to this culture and climate goal. And when staff asked me, or asked Angela, what's the focus this year on professional development? That is the focus for district professional development. Again, this is district-wide. Buildings will play off of that, and you'll see in their plans, and I know they shared some of them with you, how they're going down then to the building level next. Like, what are they doing for social emotional learning? How are they taking this learning and spreading it down to the staff and holding them accountable for implementation? So, you're not saying anything anymore. Why not? Well, the next one is student achievement. And so hopefully that's going to come on here pretty soon.
It's on slides.
We have it at least in our packet.
Yeah, okay. So student achievement. One of the things we spent time last year doing was studying instructional frameworks to determine what direction to go. And if you remember, we kind of settled on Marzano's instructional framework. And an instructional framework really takes the teaching standards and it really dives down and kind of defines those teaching standards in a little plain English for people and what it means. Same kind of a rubric that we're using with standards reference grading, but what is meet the standards, what does below the standard mean, and what does it mean to exceed the standard. So it gives a definition and some specifics for teachers. And so we were needing that here in Oskaloosa as a way to improve our core instruction. And so we kind of landed on Marzano as being where we were going with that. And then like the day after we made that decision, the state came out with the Iowa instructional framework. And the cost difference was huge. Purchasing Marzano's framework was like $15,000. The Iowa one was free. And so we got the committee back together, $0 and $15,000. And so we looked at the Iowa instructional framework and we said, let's try this one. Let's go with the one the Iowa is recommending for the year, and let's see how it goes with it, and if we like it, and if we don't, we can, reconsider and move on. But so far, everything I've seen and the administrators have worked through with this instructional framework is high quality, and it makes a lot of sense. So our first goal under improvement in student achievement is to gain a better understanding of that instructional framework, and get an idea of what those definitions are and what are those core indicators that quality teaching is defined as. And the second one is just to start the implementation. And again, not to overwhelm the staff with handing them this rubric, and I think I've showed you the rubric, so it's not little, but so to hand them the rubric and say, okay, guess what, you got to implement all of those, would be unfair to them since it's a brand new tool. So our goal is to align all of our goals to one of those indicators, which is not hard to do. They are aligned to something. And have the teachers and the teams, the PLC teams, implement one domain, one indicator, one descriptor. And we've actually narrowed it down to 2. And when we had our meeting with all the administrators, we all agreed on the 2. We did it separately, and then we came back together and we all picked the same 2. So that was interesting. So it is under the instruction domain, and I can't remember which one. I'm looking at Mark because I think he knows.
Teacher knowledge of students.
Teacher knowledge of students, and what's the second one?
Standards and objectives.
Standards and objectives.
Okay. So we're going to narrow it down and really focus on those 2 and help the teachers understand those 2 and implement. By implementing those, it will spread to all the rest of them. So that's where we're going with core instruction for this year. When you go to, we couldn't drop standards reference grading, so we do have a district priority around student achievement when it comes to standards reference grading, but we had a lot of conversation about where are we at, what do we need to re-look at, what do we need to get a hold of, this is moving maybe a little too fast. So we went backwards kind of with the goal, but that it's still, we're not quite there yet, so you can see why we have this goal. Identify all priority standards so that we understand and know what the priorities are for every grade level in every subject. Create those proficiency rubrics and make sure that we have all those done, and not that they won't ever need to be tweaked, but that they're consistent between all classrooms and all subject areas that are using them. And then common formative assessments, like how are we knowing whether it's being effective or not without those? And that they're all aligned to a standard and they're uploaded to the staff resource page. So we're kind of going to put the grading conversation aside for now, because until we have those things done consistently, and well, you can't go to those grading practices yet. Okay, so that's our goal for standards reference grading. Finances and facilities, I don't think any of these are going to be a surprise to any of you. Negative deficit spending, we just can't have that. And so specifically we're working on, and I think this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, but special education. Title I is projected to go negative by the end of this year. It'll be close to even. So we're going to have to make some decisions in Title I to move into the fiscal year 2021 so that we don't go negative. Homeschool assistance, we've talked about that one's negative, and we're digging our way out of that. And then, of course, food service is the other one that's negative. Not forgetting all the rest of them, because those all need to stay positive, but making sure that those are headed in the right direction to not be negative. Open enrolled out students continues to be our goal. All of the administrators reduce the number of open enrolled out students, and the only way we can do that is by doing that culture and climate thing and the student achievement thing. And then, just for Carl, because he just really likes these long-range plans. No, they're really important. Long-range facility plan for future growth and improvement, so that we're making progress in an organized manner. Safety and security, a lot with the EOP this year, so making sure we're providing professional development to staff on the emergency operations plan, and that includes all staff in that plan, making sure that we're being compliant with that and that we have those processes and procedures in place. And then just to continue to create long-range plans for safety and security and how we can improve that and always get better at those things. So those are the 4 district priorities and kind of our plan, big picture for the district. I don't know how far you want to go, but, whoops, back. How do we pay for all of this stuff? Because sometimes you guys ask about that, you know, people going to conferences or paying for Eric Jensen to come in or whatever. So we do have teacher quality funds, and that gets put into 3 pots, a district pot, a building pot, and an individual pot. And so for like the district money, we're paying for like the Eric Jensen, the Connections Matter, Willie Jolly, those kinds of things. If we get books for people or materials to implement, it comes out of the district level professional development. Buildings also get an allotment of money, and that is for teams of teachers to attend conferences or do some work, curriculum work, or make progress towards their goal. But it is more of a building-driven decision, or a BLT, or an ILT. We're kind of changing that a little bit. But it's more for the building initiative. So Mark wants to take a group of teachers to visit another school about SEL and pay for the substitutes out of that building pot. And then there's also an individual pot. So an individual teacher could apply to the TQ committee to use funds individually, because my goal is to implement this indicator on the instructional framework, and I know this school or this conference would be really good to support this. And so then the teacher quality committee reviews that request and could approve that or not, if they feel like it supports the goal or not. So with all of those 3 things, there's an expectation of reporting back to teachers as to how those things went or what the impact was, and sharing the knowledge. Questions about where we're going?
So you mentioned the building level, that pays for the subs. Is that the same for the individual level? Like if teachers go to conventions during teaching time?
Yep, they would put in a request and they would ask for like a registration cost, if there's any travel costs, substitute costs, meals. If they need to plan that out, depending on where it is, and so then they make a request for that money.
About how much money is in the teacher quality fund? Or what are they allotted?
No, probably not more than that.
Okay.
We started in fiscal year 19, like 156,000, and we were very aggressive about trying to spend that, and probably still end up somewhere around 156,000. So I'm kind of guessing at this point, but I would say it's over 1,000. So. We've been a lot more strategic with federal funds over this last year, and we're still growing into that with ESSA. But that also comes with opportunities for us for professional development. So.
And remember this as part of, like, Carl gave you the little spreadsheet with the different funds and what it can be spent for. Teacher quality funds are spent on professional development. There is some legislation that you can now scoop that money and use it for other things, but you have to hold a public hearing and tell the public what you're doing. And that is one of the funds that you could take money from. So if you would get a large balance, or you feel like all the professional development needs are met, you could, as a board, transfer money. So let's say you wanted to buy curriculum and it's going to be $50,000. You could hold a public hearing and make that recommendation and move that money. That we aren't recommending that, but it can only be spent on professional development the way it is now. You can't pay my salary out of it.
Your next page, the results, the top item says, all members of Oskaloosa schools are expected to learn and grow and are provided the tools and resources to do so. And I think every day I get up and I want to learn and grow every day, and I think our quality teachers want to do that, and administrators and everything, so I think it all should work together.
We expect all administrators at all levels to work in conjunction to align their goals. and provide accountability and feedback for that. We want teachers to work collaboratively and individually to grow their skills. And our other outcome is that students benefit from the aligned efforts and enhanced collaboration and improved classroom practices. So those are our outcomes. So I know we are planning on a work session time to kind of talk about goals and if we're headed in the right direction and my goals individually. So if you, after you've thought about this and considered this, if I'm going the wrong direction or you want me to tweak and go a little bit different, you know, we can discuss that. Because I know I threw this at you without having that conversation. But they were begging, they were like, where are we going? I said, okay, here's where we're going. So, if I'm way off base, tell me now.
Any comments, questions, concerns?
So when Mrs. her name's escaping me, sorry, the past curriculum programs. Stephanie, sorry.
Yeah.
She provided those reports after, like, in the fall, winter, spring. Are you still planning on doing that this year?
With student data?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Angie and I have talked about how that should look and what, to make it readable, but yes, all of that data and anything else you want, we can make sure you have.
As far as doing another type of goal setting work session, what are the board's wishes as far as I'm interested in the feedback there? Now, maybe?
I think we ought to do something sooner than later.
That's my preference as well.
I mean, if we wait till the new board, it'll be January. It happens, we go on vacation in January.
So maybe like the second meeting in September?
Uh,
No.
He's retired.
So the rubrics that you included in there, is that to be from the state level stuff that then you would, we as a district, you as administrators are free to tweak as you see fit, or is this an initiative?
It is not etched in stone and it is voluntary. As far as the state is concerned, they're providing a resource at this point in time. I've heard rumors that the legislature is going to mandate that you have an instructional framework, not mandate which one. So Danielson has a good one, Marzano has a good one, and this one's a pretty good one. So yes, you could tweak it if there is a definition or something you wanted to add something to it, or tweak what's included. You could do that at this point.
That covers my question. There's a few things that I was read through all, and I'm like, really? But maybe I don't understand the context of what's just being spoken. I don't think we need to go through all of that, but for a work session, might be something to talk about.
Right now, it's not mandated that you do it. It's available for you as a resource. I have a feeling it's going to be coming down the pipe that you are going to be mandated to do something with the instruction. We have been, I guess I'll speak for myself. I've been impressed with it so far from what I've been reading and learning, just in, diving into it and defining the words. The administrators have been working on the middle row, which is needs expectations, and picking out keywords and what does that mean to you, what does that mean to me, and, common definitions of that middle row. And, having the conversations, and so far, we've really been liking it. Now, I know what you're talking about, because some of it says, sometimes does this. Is that what you're talking about?
That's some of that kind
Yes.
of thing.
And that's the conversation of, what does sometimes mean? And really shouldn't it be all the time? And those are the conversations that we're having as we're moving through these and using them.
Well, I'll just use one on the expectations of students simply referring to teacher expectations. That's great, that sounds great, but are the teachers given the teeth in order to have that done? Or is it an empty mandate? Which I'm not trying to trash it or anything, I'm just saying that, that would be one of the 10 questions I'd have if we covered that type of conversation.
I'd just like to say that I am more than kind of excited, I'm really excited about after Mrs. Wright's been here a year, is that now with the rules and things like that, we're seeing a change in the expectations of staff, expectations of students, and finances and everything. We're starting to see a plan of attack of where we're going and everything like that. I think it's real progress.
That's the focus on education. We decide the second meeting in September.
I didn't hear anybody object.
Okay.
So that's what we'll consider.
All right.
So the next item, do we have any person that was considered personnel contracts,
No.
resignations, and transfers? We don't have them, right? So we will move on to the next item, which is under board priority number 2, culture, climate, safety, and security. And that is consider request from the Oskaloosa High School Student Council to adjust the calendar due to homecoming.
Yeah, so I included a calendar in your packet for 1920 that was approved, I believe, back in January. I did have the student council come set up an appointment with me and visit with me about homecoming. And it is scheduled for Friday, September 27th, and their concern that they expressed to me was that that's a day off for, it's a professional development day for staff. And it is the day-to-day after the fall assessments. So it is movable. But one of the things that I didn't consider when I was building the calendar was what day homecoming was, and I should have. So I would like for you to consider their request. I know that Jack, right?
Yeah.
Jack, yeah. I don't know if it's Jackson or Jack.
Jack.
Jack, Mr. Dawson, is here representing or serving on as student council, and he would like to make that request to you. So I didn't say this to Sarah, so I'm going to say it to the audience. Because we're on TV, can you stand up when you talk to the board so the camera knows who to focus in on? She got away with it, but next time I'll make her stand up. So Jack, do you want to stand up?
And even better by the yellow line.
And even better up by the yellow line. You can do it, buddy.
He'll do
You
just
can
fine.
do it.
A little nervous here. No, I'm just kidding. Okay,
He was
so this Friday, the cheerleaders love to have a pep rally, and that just gets everybody hyped up for the game and for the dance. So obviously we have a bunch of activities planned through homecoming week. We have a bunch of dress-up days. We call it our spirit week. So we just have a bunch of stuff planned. We have some fun games. Sometimes we have games throughout the week, but mainly is this pep rally. So if we don't have this pep rally on Friday, that loses a lot of the hype for the game and for the dance. And a lot of people just forget about the dance. And I mean, obviously, like the go-to football fans will be at the game, but some people wouldn't be. And it spreads a lot of school spirit because we have a lot of the class battles, like the senior class versus the sophomores, and like some minute-to-win games. That's always super fun. Go seniors. Go seniors. I'm just kidding. So yeah, the student council would love if we could move this date so that we can spread the school spirit all the way through homecoming week instead of moving this pep rally to the following Monday, which would lose all the hype for the game.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Any
Thank you.
questions? Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my recommendation is, you can sit down.
Okay.
This is the day-to-day that we plan for teachers to crunch the data from their fall assessment. And the reason that we picked a Friday instead of a Monday was to include the preschool teachers in that PLC conversation and work. And so we had originally talked about moving it to the Monday, because that makes sense to just move it to Monday. And the kids would really like the day off after the homecoming, so I understand that. But my recommendation is to move it to Friday, October 4th, move it a week later. That gives the teachers the day-to-day to crunch the data. It allows the preschool to participate and it avoids homecoming. So I know it's really close to the conferences. So, are you open to making a change to the calendar?
Yes, and I think we should make sure we check homecoming
Next year.
next year.
Well, I-
So we can-
On that note, I came up with a list of things that might check spring break, consult parents first, homecoming sports schedules, state tournaments, prepare teacher conferences, eating schedules, for parent for the preschool. Those were my list of things that we need to look at for next year.
Really, that needs to go back to the labor management committee, right?
This list,
Yeah.
sheet,
Because those are things that we were on, and I guess,
I didn't think about all.
they didn't, they did not, I know.
That's where I'll start this year, this fall, with labor management on building a calendar again for 2021. And with our change in focus with SIAC, that will be one of the things that we'll get input from the SIAC on. That's a good place to start, is on the calendar, moving that forward. But again, Lynette's list is great. We need that for when we start building and start having conversations about calendars.
Do you need a motion to change
I was just
that?
gonna say, I'm looking for a
I
motion.
would move that, changing the date.
A motion and a second from Lynette.
I really think that there should be school today at homecoming.
Yes.
So I have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? If not, please read the question.
Please move to adjust the 2019-2020 school calendar by moving the faculty professional development day from September 27 to October 4.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any opposed, Jeff?
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, moving on to the next item is under board priority number 3, right? Consider approval of minutes, financials, and abstract of claims. Any comments? Let's start with minutes. Any comments about minutes? Sometimes. I did not notice anything either. Financial statement. Do you have
Very
any comments?
Elementary.
Summary, yeah.
Extremely elementary. Actually, August will have a little more activity and we'll start seeing some of the revenues come in for the next school year. It's pretty meager, so. Because most of the expenditures were expensed back in June, so.
And I know Carl gets really excited about the balance every time, but I'd like to keep warning you that we do have some money in there for this early childhood rec center that inflates that a little bit. By a few million.
General fund still at $378,000.
I know, but-
$378,800.
When you say the 5 million, I want people to know why there's $5 million
And
difference.
there's $5,290,700 in there, and 2.5 to 3 million is earmarked for the early childhood.
Because we're
We
trying to-
still got 2 million.
All right. We got that number, that we always get again, so then.
I can remember days when we would have $1 million borrowed from ICE Cap at this point.
Oh, shouldn't have to do that.
Lots of money borrowed from ICE Cap.
I have a question for Chad.
Yeah.
On the nutrition fund,
Yeah.
and I know you don't know, so I can ask you before, so, is that kind of where we ended up last year? I can't remember. And I thought it was greater than that, but,
A greater negative or?
Greater negative.
Greater negative, I think that is correct,
so
yes.
we're coming down.
I haven't run any of my, initial data, but as we went over the last 6 months, we trended all ahead of last year, yes.
I want to say last month, I looked at where we were at, and we were like -94.
I thought that seemed
Something like that.
Yeah.
Making progress.
Oh, yeah.
Not out of the hole yet, but making progress.
Any other questions on financials? If not, we'll move to abstract of claims. Any questions there?
I do have one additional thing that I put in your spots, TK Concrete for the project out here in front of the middle school, $224,000. Let's see, $224,056.22.
Is that the last payment minus retainage, or is that?
There's a little more than retainage left, about 36,000-ish, or 30, I can't remember where it is, 30-some thousand left. So we'll have some, they did have to redo a few of the drains, and then, we'll get the entire retainage thing there. And I don't know if you want to get a little bit of an update, Bill. I think it's looking extremely good. We've really gone through all the punch list items, and obviously the markings have already been put in place, so
We should
this
be
time
good.
next month should really be looking for the project completion.
Yep, it should be completed.
And driving on the guys well.
Looks nice. Okay, how about abstract of claims? Any questions?
I had 5 questions and Chad answered them.
Okay.
I have just kind of a couple basic questions. I think I know the answer, but one of those things that I like out in the public. We have several non-public parent transportation reimbursement. Explain why and what for, not individual ones, but as a class.
The state does provide non-public transportation funds. We're basically a pass-through for that. So we they have to give affidavit twice a year, once for each semester, saying that they transported their kid. In this case, I think all of them were published in high school. And then we pass that information on to the state. There's a kind of a proration based on how much the legislature has allocated for non-public transportation. And so we get those funds and then pass them on to the parents at that early
Yes, and then we have to Cedar Rapids Community School District and the College Community School District some special ed billing.
Yeah, and I don't know necessarily about those particular students, but
I would be appropriate to
no,
discuss.
right, not names I know, but I don't know necessarily the condition of the students that makes them have to be served at college, or maybe it's a family issue as well, because not that I want to get too far into the weeds, but there is a difference between how you bill on regular ed and special ed. Regular ed follows much more where the student resides. Special ed follows where their parent, but their legal attachment is. It's not always obviously a parent. A lot of times it is, but the termination rights and all those kind of things. But you're attached to a particular person. It's where that person resides that affects it. So this may be a student that hasn't even necessarily lived with his parent for quite some time, and maybe living somewhere else, and yet it is responsibility of that parent that lives in our district, so they bill this district. It gets a little bit convoluted, obviously, when we're trying to go through and Charmaine and telling the stories. So,
A lot of those placements are out of the hands of the district. It's done by juvenile court, it's done by DHS, it's done by some other court. So rarely have I ever seen a school district voluntarily say, let's spend all this money and place this child out of our district.
Well, exactly, and it's just a matter of, again, I like everybody to know how things are working, and, you know, it's a little over $54,000 is a chunk of change in between those two, so obviously we wouldn't do that if we had a choice, but sometimes we don't have a choice about it.
And
It's
that's
state law.
probably are not our choices.
Any other questions?
I have a few, and I apologize for not being able to call earlier, but on page 2, under amplified education, it's for $25,181. I was confused, because didn't we pay for that curriculum last year?
Yes, but there is a replacement of consumables,
Okay.
and that is an annual cost of replacing those consumables.
Okay.
Don't ask me what they
That
all
was
are.
part of the presentation.
No, I remember that, okay, good. I was just confused, I was like,
Frogs. It's not all frogs. Minnows,
dissectables?
things that are consumable until last.
Okay, that makes sense. I was
Okay,
just-
we didn't spend that much on frogs.
And then under the couple fund, the football field renovation, page 16. Page 61,039.
yeah, that's the turf that is put down.
And the community.
Yeah, the old community stadium, correct, yeah. Finally got around to that, so.
It looks very good. I was worried there in July, but coming back up.
Any other ones that people have?
With the Wilson kits, is that just replacing? Is that buying a new system? Is it the training that goes with it?
What page are you on?
Page 13, that was the one I had.
It was just
circled
my
out.
note.
So it's $41,130.
Foundations is the new, we did some work on phonics instruction last year and found some missing gaps in the kindergarten first and second. And so foundations is the materials that we are supplementing for teachers to fill those gaps. So they're kids for the K1 and 2 teachers. I think second grade got it, not just kindergarten.
Any other questions?
I was excited to see that.
It's a really solid research-based program.
It is. And we had had it, some of it, way early years and years ago. I don't know where it all went.
I believe the special ed teachers have
Do they
copies
still have
of
those?
some kits, some bills and things, and, yeah. So, yeah, we still have it.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I would be looking for a motion to approve the minutes, financials, and abstract of claims.
Second.
Motion and a second, any other questions? And if not, would you read the question?
Is moved to approve the minutes, financials, and abstract of claims as presented, including an additional invoice to TK Concrete Inc. in the amount of $224,056.52.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Sign this and pass it around. Next item on our agenda is consider approval of the lobby guard purchase for Oskaloosa Elementary School.
So this has been through the Safety and Security Committee, and Sherry is here to answer any questions, but she had a subcommittee of secretaries, administrators, and herself, and they had been researching all last year, seems like it went a long time, different entry systems for scanning, for sex offender registry, and just a safety and security measure for the entrance. I'm not saying it right, I probably typed it better than I said it, but when students come to visit, our students, the parents come to visit at the elementary school. And eventually, we'd like to spread this to all buildings, but we want to test it at a building before we spend that much money. And if it can work at the elementary, it'll work at anywhere, because they have the most ins and outs. Sherry, do you want to give any update on why you picked Lobby Guard versus any of the others?
We visited some schools and talked to other schools and evaluated the 3 different systems. And some of it was cost and ongoing costs that Lobby Guard didn't have, and just compatibility with the systems we already have in place for computer systems and ease of use. So that was really how we came down to Lobby Guard.
And is it a one-time or an ongoing?
There's an ongoing, I think it's $700.
This one's on
Annual fee.
Annual $500 fee, and then the software support at $200, so it's a $700 annual.
And that's for 2 stations. So we have 2 tablets that can scan driver's licenses when people.
So I had the question of if a person doesn't have a driver's license or they're undocumented, what are some other?
It'll scan just like if they just have an ID. It'll scan that. If they didn't bring it with them, the secretaries can manually enter their information. If it's an undocumented, some of those will scan, some of them won't, is what we've heard from other schools. So it all comes down to what policies we put in place to use this. But what I've heard from other schools is they will just escort somebody to a classroom if they can't get them scanned for some reason.
Is this so, I go on day 1 with my license, I go back on day 2, do I have to continue, every day you have to get?
That'll be part of our policy that we write on, whether that would be more like a volunteer basis, how often do we want to scan volunteers. And it's mainly for people that are going past the office, so if people are staying in the office, we wouldn't necessarily need to scan them. But it will tie in with Infinite Campus, and so any red flags we have in there for like custody issues, that kind of thing, that'll also flag. So that's where we'll have to determine how we want to use that data. It can be used for a lot more things like checking in and out students and those kinds of things that it's capable of, so we can kind of track that as well. But we will have to write some policies around how it's used.
So is your group going to work on those policies then?
Yeah, I assume the elementary primarily, and myself, and up that district too, so.
And how do you communicate that with parents?
How will you communicate with parents when we decide to start it?
I said early and often.
Yes.
In many different methods.
And we might start it, I would suggest starting it on a trial basis, with just people that come in saying, hey, would you be willing to do this for us? We're trying the system out, would you be willing to scan your ID and let us see how this works? And practice for a while, and the secretaries get good at that, and then, you know. We aren't trying to turn
Implemented
people.
in stages is what you're saying, right?
Amanda, the presentation that the committee, it's almost instantaneous. I mean, it's not a 10-minute waiting or anything.
No, it does take their photo and prints the photo on a visitor badge, so it has a current visitor badge right on them, so.
And these
So
are
if they see someone in the hallway that doesn't have that visitor badge, then it'll also take some training on staff to, know what to ask a person when they don't see that.
And like she said earlier, we're really gonna start with just people that are going to visit. We're going to classroom volunteer. If you just come and pick up your child, that's not where we're gonna start. Not for programs or, we have hundreds of people there.
And again, the
Yeah.
Safety and Security Committee has looked at this, and they're also working on it.
Yep.
And as a member of the committee, I recommend approval.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? If not, would you read the question?
Just move to approve the purchase and implementation of the lobby guard system by Lobby Guard Solutions LLC in the amount of $6,900.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Sharon.
She gets to stay there because the next item
That's
is
right,
wireless
because it's
access
more
system.
technology, right? Yeah. Consider the approval of the purchase of middle school wireless access system. The next couple of pages.
So as part of our budgeting process, we do give Sherry a budget for technology upgrades throughout the district, and it's come to our attention that our wireless access points at the middle school are needing replaced. So I think about that point, I'll turn it over to you.
The majority of them are end of support sometime during this school year, and most of them, some of them already in June, and some of them around December. So I looked at that and looked at, it's time to, we're going to switch wireless access point vendors, and I would like to do the whole building at once rather than kind of piecemeal it. So we wanted to do the entire middle school and fill in the gaps that we found when we did ISASP testing. We found some places that didn't have very good signal, so we needed to add additional as well. So we put it out for bid for the ruckus system and got the 3 bids back. And the lowest one was from Herbs for
$32,75.
We also have some at Webster, and even this one here is end of life as well, but we could take some of the ones that are still newer that are at the middle school and kind of move those around with the current system that way too. From one of the apps.
Comments or questions?
How many bid spots did you have at middle school? Or how many
Well, we were
volunteers?
scrambling. We had, because we have some rooms that don't have them in there that they share a room, so it's like every other room. So we had about at least 6 classrooms that were pretty weak. And we scrambled and pulled some from some other places and put some in, so.
Any other questions? If not, I would make a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any other questions or comments? If not, please read the question.
Just move to approve purchase and implementation of Ruckus Zone Flex Access Pins by Rivers Technology Solutions in the amount of $32,175.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to board priority number 4, professional learning. And those policies, right? Consider the final reading of revised board policy 203, conflict of interest.
Again, this is a final reading. The change in this policy is changing, I believe, from $2,500 to $6,000, but the legislature changed the board member conflict of interest. So this was a recommendation by law.
Okay. So I'm looking for, again, final approval. This is our second reading on this. Do I have a motion to approve? So, a second?
Second.
Craig, name yourself. I have a motion and a
It's close,
second.
close.
Any other comments or questions? If not, please read the question.
This is motion to approve for the second and final reading of revised board policy 203, Board of Directors conflict of interest as presented.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Moving on to the next policy. Next item is consider first reading of revised board policies 507 and 508.
So, this is a celebration that we're finally finishing the 500 series. A month late, but we're finishing. So 500 and 800s are here in front of you. There's a summary sheet first of just a quick summary of the changes. The policy committee has reviewed them, albeit a while ago, so they may not quite remember all of these, but most of the changes are just updates to what we're currently doing, so current practice, updating some forms that were outdated, and then we have a newer form. I'd be open to any comments or suggestions or changes. This is a first reading, so any comments you make tonight we can incorporate into the final reading next month.
Okay. Everybody looked at them. Any comments or questions?
Did she do looking through this and?
Yes, yes. That's the reason that these two were a little bit longer than the rest. Lynette did have a question or a suggestion, I guess, on 507.9R1, the wellness regulations. It does not mention recess under the physical activity goal 2. And I think she did say this at the policy committee, but for some reason didn't make it in here. So the IASB regulation recommends a statement under physical activity of a minimum of 20 minutes of recess a day. She's not sure that's enough. But do you want to address recess? That's what the requirement is, a minimum of 20 minutes?
I don't think that's
I don't
enough.
think that's enough. I would agree.
So, do you want a statement about recess in here? Are we okay with it not being there?
Well, we have 30 minutes of recess, right? And that's been like that for a long time.
But I would think one recess a day is not enough. I don't think, I know we're gonna hear the argument of trying to fit everything in. I think 2 to 3 recesses per day.
What's a recess? Is it
Well,
we get into that too?
Well, it does comment in here about teachers providing short physical activity breaks of 3 to 5 minutes, brain breaks, those kinds of things, the sensory paths, walking in the building.
And the lower grades do have more than just the 30-minute recess. They have another 15-minute recess either in the morning or afternoon, for sure.
So would you, how would a statement be about a minimum of 30 minutes of recess be included under that physical education goal? Would that be an addition that everybody would be okay with?
I was on the policy committee, but I assume there's a certain range that you're doing, or
K-5.
I assumed it was that, but I didn't hear anything, and I didn't see anything on here.
Sorry, we were talking. And then also a suggestion under goal 3, after I had printed this, was to put in a statement of other school-based activities to promote wellness, to support hand washing as a goal, and encourage hand washing prior to lunch, recess, restrooming, those kinds of things.
Back on the previous one with the recess, it said 4 students will not be kept in sight for recess for more than half of the time due to failure to meet classroom expectations. Where does that come from? Is that from the state?
That is recommended by the State for Healthy Kids Act, that you don't take away a student's whole recess, that they need time to move around. Now, that doesn't mean they have to have recess with everyone else. They might have a private recess, a chance to run around the playground by themselves, to run off the energy. But
I think anytime we take take the ability from the teachers to be able to say, this was a bad infraction and you're not listening and you need to know. You just lost this whole recess. I personally think, I'm not a teacher, but I think it's a mistake. I can remember being a kid and when you lost that whole recess, that really stunk and it made you reassess what you were thinking about doing, whether you wanted to do that or not. I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Well, and Eric, kind of to support that, is if you only have one recess, it's tough. If you have multiple recesses, then you can hold them back on that second recess. But like I said, if we contain ourselves to one recess, then we're going to get a problem. So, but that's a scheduling issue, and that's something that the elementary has to look at.
Well, I do recognize I have a friend who, one of the kids is AD or HD, I don't know whatever the diagnosis says, but I know that we were visiting one time and he told me that they're in another district and that he gone to the teachers and said, if you want to keep my kid after school for detention or anything else you can think of, I will support you, I will come pick the kid up, I will never complain. But my kid needs to get their energy out or your problems are just going to get worse. So I understand that, but again, I don't like one size fits all for that type of things where you really need some teacher judgment involved.
But the statement is from the state. So
This recommendation of a goal, again, these are goals.
I agree with you, but I don't think we can change.
So this guy's not going to come down if the kid loses. Recess. No.
Well, it's a
It's not
goal
what we
versus a
want to
regulation.
happen, no, that we want to happen.
No, but there are state standards of how much time they have to have for physical activity per week. So, and the elementary principal probably already know that. I mean, it's a requirement.
So are we okay with adding proper hand washing under goal 3? And keeping the goal 2 with the or?
There are no objections.
Okay. Any other, those were the ones that were brought to my attention. Need any other clarifications on any of the rest of them?
Yeah, some go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just clarification would be the right word. I didn't understand where it was with the medication request form.
Okay.
And then it says
What's the number?
507.2E2. It says exception only for the middle school and high school. I understand it, so pretty much the same thing as what it said right above. So what's the exception? I didn't understand.
Well, this came from Linda, so,
I'll look at it again.
prescription medication may be administered as listed by the high school and by the school nurse only if you're pregnancy. In other words, if you want to take Tylenol out of your bag, you gotta have the nurse be able to know about it. The parent needs to know about it. The parent has to give us, right? Okay, so we are not gonna give out Tylenol unless the parent signs this. It says we can give the kid Tylenol. Middle school, high school, I don't believe we give Tylenol or anything like that at the elementary at all. If you give permission.
Well, obviously, we don't want our kids doing illegal drugs in the high school or middle school or anything like that. But personally, I feel like as a parent, if my kid's sick, but they're not too sick to go to school, that they're smart enough as a high schooler to say, you know what, yeah, it's been 4 hours now and I can take my next dose of Tylenol. I don't think there needs to be anybody involved in it other than the kid who's taking the medicine.
Is that what that says? But the nurse is not going to be.
The nurse will not
be
hand out medicine. So we have a big jar of Tylenol in the nurse's office, and the nurse will not give that out. It's under lock and key. Will not give that out unless this is a go out.
I believe in the committee we talked about, Eric, that high school junior needs Tylenol, it takes one out of your pocket and drink water.
That's what they do.
I mean, it's
I don't think anybody will know.
the only thing is the nurse isn't going to do it.
Okay, so that wasn't, I was misunderstanding,
And I
that's why I
believe-
wanted clarification.
But I believe that's the way we discussed it in the
Okay.
committee. Well, I remember it.
Any other clarifications?
This is a picky little thing, but some of them, the data will be on the data division. I think we need to be.
Because I got tired of
Okay. Because I was like, some of them don't say
it.
2019.
Lisa will do that.
Okay.
Isn't that
because-
how it was the same day in 2013?
That's why I noticed it.
And
So
because
anyway,
I'm on the committee, I move to approve the first reading.
Thank you.
With those adjustments
With the
on the
adjustment.
Wellness
wellness
policy.
policy.
Right? So there's a motion, do I have a second? Motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? If not, please read the question.
Consider to approve the first reading, revised board policies 507 through 508 as presented and amended.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next item on our agenda is consider adoption of the IASB legislative priorities.
So are you able to come to consensus on what we should mark as our top priorities for IASB?
Yep, 1, 2, 11.
That's
Well,
all.
I think it looked like to me, like last with the board training, that only 3 people had actually turned in, so I have what I think here.
I did it right away, so I wouldn't forget. So
I would think I would remember to do that since I've been
I'm usually one.
every year for the last 3 years.
So people pick number 2, which is standards and accountability. And 2 people pick number 7, which is mental health.
I had 4, 7, and 29.
4,
7 is not a common one.
4, 7, and what?
29. And I'm gonna make my motion again on 28 of no, that we condemn that.
Condemn it?
Yeah.
Which one is 28?
Bond
Bond
issues?
issues?
Yeah.
I agree
I'll
with you.
I was gonna put that on the September agenda.
She's being silly.
I am. Sorry, so 7 is a common one, the mental health. Are we good with standards and accountability?
I
Got question marks by.
do. I don't like the way it's written. I agree with standards and accountability, but I don't like the restrictions that the state puts on us based on the standards and accountability.
And that I would say probably why the reason I didn't choose to is I also wasn't all about verbiage
Right.
involved.
Because I think, I agree, your standards and accountability, but yet, based on where the state has gone educationally over the last 20 years, I have a feeling of what they're really meaning in that, and I didn't agree with that.
What does that mean? I'm not sure I know what
What she means? or
Yes.
What that means? Want to expand?
Well, I think, how do I expand on that? For instance, like when we were kids, school seemed to be a lot more simple. And was it worse that they needed to do all these things? And put these time limits and everything on it, and standards and Iowa code and so on, or just let teachers teach what they know to teach. Reading, math, arithmetic, science, social studies. You know, we don't hear anything about social studies anymore, and I think students are suffering because they aren't learning all those subjects, because what we have to do at a core, we have to do math, we have to do this, we have to do that. And I think scores have suffered because of it.
It's a get back to basics.
Right, right.
I think in standards accountability, in the top paragraph, standards benchmarks that reflect real-world knowledge and skills students need to graduate from high school, prepare for college, and to enter the workforce. And then you can add in the state things and things like that. But the last sentence there, assessments aligned to high expectations, improve and align instruction and quality professional development. I mean, I think that's what we expect, high expectations of our kids.
And I really think you should take 2 and tie it together with your 29, which is expanding educational opportunities. And, you know, in the CTE area and in preparing for workforce, you know, it's not just about college. I think that's what you're talking about here with the expanded opportunities. But it's about preparing kids to be successful citizens of our community and society.
And keeping it local for the ability for school boards and schools to say, look, you know, we have a need, and we are not constrained by, okay, this is the model, this is what you do. We have a new idea, we have a better idea, we want to try it. Which is what we're doing. I'm not saying that what we're doing isn't working, but the old definition of insanity is that, well, we're just going to keep doing this even though it's working, versus having the freedom to say, no, we're going to try something else. But I do agree with what you're saying, the 29 and 2 are they're tied in. Yes.
Nobody picked, can we all jump on the same bandwagon of supplemental state aid, number 20? Anything in the, we don't have enough funding category, or is that too close to raising taxes?
I
That's, I think typically that has been one of the issues.
Either the don't to do unfunded mandates or provide supplemental state aid. Is that something we can jump on board with?
It's, for me, it always before also had to do with beginning to execute.
Expanding that.
But that got done very much.
How about 2, 7, and 20?
I like that.
This is right, that.
I'm fine with
This-
it. Yes, she said she likes that, but she doesn't have a vote.
She didn't have a, yeah.
Not that only complicated, but you can vote for.
Oh, you
29.
can. I thought we had to do 29.
Add 29. 2, 7, 20, and 29.
Can I jump in on that?
Well, can you two live with, because you had objections to number 2?
Live with it, doesn't mean I like it, but live with it's my business. And yeah, I'm gonna make a pitch for the early literacy.
I really like that one.
I've always really felt like that our most important task as parents or in the school or whatever is to make readers out of our kids, teach those kids how to read, because quite honestly, if you have really strong reading skills, you can teach yourself anything else you have a desire to learn, and if you don't have those reading skills, you're not gonna learn any of the other ones, and to me, that's really a priority for early literacy. Spending your money where you get the most bang for the buck.
We have 4 of them, so.
Would that be a replacement?
Which one?
Is that it?
I haven't heard anybody debate that one. Comments on 4 replacing 2?
4, 7, 20, and 29.
Good.
I'm good with that.
Do I have a motion for some of that?
So moved.
One second. Second. We have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? Please read the question.
It is moved to approve the IASB legislative action priorities for 2020 as presented and identified as resolutions 4, 7, 20, and 29.
Just to make sure everybody knows, 4 was early literacy, 7 was mental health, 20 was spelling, thank you, 20 was findings,
And educational opportunities.
and 29 is expanded education opportunities. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay?
I would like to make a motion that we condemn number 28.
Okay.
Announce taxation on representation to the people of rural communities.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. What?
Would you read it to me?
So it's going to a simple majority versus a super majority for bond.
On issues.
It's taxation.
Simple as
So I'm
our
giving it-
majority. I was like, I really was joking, I'm not very sure about this.
I knew you
The
were.
motion is to suggest that it be removed.
Yeah,
He used
move
the
to
word
actively.
condemn.
I
I just wasn't sure what was in there.
Scratch it from the list.
So you do have a motion and a second.
Motion and a second. Any other comments or questions?
I strongly agree with that.
I do too.
Thank you.
All right, if not, please read the question.
It is moved to actively reject the IASB legislative action priority for 2020 as presented and identified as resolution number 28.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay,
Thank
I
you.
think we did that last year.
Yeah. As long as they put it on there, as long as I'm there.
If you stay on the board, you can do it again next year.
I really think you need to go stay on and
Do what?
go to the
We
legislative.
need to go speak on the microphone.
Okay, Richie, a fly on the wall.
All right. So we're out of here in an
Our
hour.
next meeting, again, we are going to post that as a work session. It is Thursday, August 15th, and it is a work session to meet with FRK Architects from 4 to 6 as the first part of visioning. And it is open to community members. I did send an invitation out to some and have received some responses that I'll be attending. So 4 to 6, it'll be a visioning meeting about improving our facilities. And then our next regular meeting is September 10th, Tuesday, at 6 p.m. Okay.
All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Will we have a second meeting in September? Yes.
Yeah, I think we talked about a couple of those work session items earlier in this meeting.
So that's the whole thing. Oh. So we'll have to talk about that.
Pick a date. Okay, given all of that, anything else? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.